What happens when a man known for strength, charm, and quiet resilience walks onto a stage where laughter usually rules? But tonight, something fragile is waiting in the air. What happens when the armor slips and the truth comes out under studio lights? Before we go any further, subscribe to Stage View, hit like, and drop a comment right now because moments like this don't happen often. And when they do, they change everything. The applause begins the way it always does on The View, bright, practiced, rhythmic. Cameras glide across the studio like predators trained to hunt reactions. The audience is smiling, clapping, leaning forward. They think they know what's coming. A charming interview. A few jokes. A viral soundbite. Pedro Pascal waves as he steps out, that familiar half-smile on his face, the one that makes people feel like they already know him. He's dressed simply, dark jacket, open collar, nothing flashy. Comfortable. Controlled. But something is off. It's subtle. A fraction of a second too long before he smiles back at the crowd. A breath drawn a little deeper than necessary. His eyes sweep the room, not searching for cameras, but for something else. Or someone. Whoopi Goldberg watches him closely. She's been doing this for decades. She knows when a guest is just tired. She knows when they're nervous. And she definitely knows when someone is carrying something heavy they haven't decided whether to put down yet. Her face doesn't change, not really. But there's a softness in her eyes that wasn't there a moment ago. Pedro takes his seat. The applause fades. The lights feel hotter now. Joy cracks a light joke, something about his busy schedule, the endless fandom, the internet's obsession with him. Laughter ripples through the audience. Pedro laughs too, politely, automatically. It's muscle memory at this point. But his laugh fades quickly, like it doesn't quite know where to land. Whoopi leans in just slightly. Not enough for the audience to notice. Enough for Pedro to feel it. "So," she says, calm, warm, deceptively casual, "how are you really doing these days?" The question hangs. It's not a trap. It's not sharp. But it's real. And the room feels it. Pedro blinks once. Twice. His hands clasped together, fingers interlacing, then tightening. "I'm good," he says at first. The standard answer. Safe. Clean. Whoopi doesn't move on. She hums gently. "You sure?" A ripple passes through the audience. This isn't in the usual rhythm. The hosts glance at each other. Someone in the crowd shifts in their seat. Pedro exhales through his nose, a long breath he didn't know he was holding. "Yeah," he says again, quieter. I'm grateful. I really am. Grateful. That word again. He's said it 1,000 times in interviews. But today it sounds heavier. Like gratitude is being used as a shield. Whoopi nods slowly. "Grateful can sit right next to exhausted," she says. "Doesn't mean you're not allowed to feel both." Something in Pedro's expression cracks. Not breaks, not yet, but cracks. His jaw tightens. He swallows. The studio is silent now. No laughter. No clapping. Just cameras zooming in, sensing blood in the water. Pedro looks down at his hands. When he speaks again, his voice is steady, but only because he's holding it there with everything he has. "I think people see the success," he says. "They see the jobs, the red carpets, the characters who survive everything. And they think that means you're okay." He looks up then, straight ahead, not at the audience, not at the cameras. "But sometimes," he continues, "you don't survive something. Sometimes you just keep moving." Whoopi's face changes completely now. The comedian disappears. The legend remains, but so does the woman. Her eyes glisten, just barely. She doesn't interrupt him. Pedro's chest rises and falls. The words are coming faster now, like once the door opened, it refused to close. "There were years," he says, "where I felt invisible. Years where I thought, maybe this just wasn't going to happen for me." And you tell yourself to be patient. You tell yourself to be strong. But there's a point where that turns into loneliness. A murmur moves through the crowd. Someone gasps softly. Joy's smile has faded. Sunny's hands are clasped in front of her mouth. The energy in the room has shifted from entertainment to witness. Pedro shakes his head slightly, like he's surprised by his own honesty. And then when it does happen, he says, when suddenly everyone knows your name, no one asks about the years before. The years where you're just trying not to disappear. Silence. Whoopi leans back in her chair, then forward again, grounding herself. When she speaks, her voice is low, steady, and unmistakably personal. "I know that road," she says. "And I know what it costs." Pedro looks at her now. Really looks at her. And for the first time since he walked out, his guard slips completely. His eyes shine unmistakably. I think, he says slowly, I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that from someone who understands. Whoopi nods. Baby, she says softly, a lot of us are still carrying the weight of who we were before anyone clapped for us. The audience reacts, not loudly but deeply. A collective inhale. A few people wipe their eyes. This isn't a segment anymore. This is a moment. Pedro presses his lips together, fighting it. He laughs once, quietly, like he's embarrassed by how close he is to the edge. I didn't expect to come here and talk about this, he admits. Whoopi gives a small, knowing smile. Life doesn't ask for permission. The camera cuts to Pedro's face just as his composure finally wavers. His eyes brim. He blinks, but it doesn't stop it. One tear escapes, trailing down his cheek. The studio goes completely still. Pedro shakes his head again, exhaling a shaky breath. I'm sorry, he says. Don't, Whoopi says immediately. Firm but kind. Don't apologize for being human. The audience breaks then, not into applause, but into something quieter. Supportive. Real. A sound of understanding. Pedro wipes his face quickly, laughing through the emotion now. This is not how I thought my morning would go, he says, and the audience chuckles softly, grateful for the release. Whoopi smiles back, but her eyes never leave him. Sometimes the truth shows up early, she says. And as the cameras roll, as the world watches from living rooms and phones and screens across the globe, one thing becomes clear. This isn't just an interview. This is the beginning of something Pedro Pascal has been holding inside for a very long time. And it's not over yet. Pedro exhales, a hand still pressed lightly against his cheek, as if he's checking whether the emotion is real or imagined. The studio lights don't soften. If anything, they feel sharper now, more intrusive. The cameras linger just long enough to make the moment undeniable, then pull back, giving him space while refusing to let him disappear. Whoopi shifts in her chair, grounding the room again. She says gently, people think this chair is about opinions. It's not. It's about truth. And sometimes truth sneaks up on you. Pedro nods, eyes still glassy. He clears his throat. I think I've spent a long time trying to make sure I'm easy, he says. Easy to work with. Easy to watch. Easy to like. Joy tilts her head. Because you had to be? Because I felt like I didn't earn the right to be difficult, Pedro replies without hesitation. The words surprise even him. He pauses, lets them sit. When you come from nothing in this industry, you learn very quickly that you're replaceable. So you don't complain. You don't slow down. You don't say no. Sonny leans forward now. That's a dangerous lesson. Pedro lets out a soft, humorless laugh. Yeah, it is. The audience is fully locked in. No one coughs. No one whispers. Even the usual background rustle of a live show seems to have vanished. Pedro's voice grows steadier, not because the emotion has faded, but because he's stopped fighting it. There's this idea, he continues, that success heals everything. That once you make it, all the fear goes away. But fear doesn't care about your resume. It remembers who you were when you were broke, when you were scared, when you were one bad month away from giving up. Whoopi nods slowly, her jaw tight. Fear has a long memory. Pedro meets her gaze. Exactly. There's a beat. Then Joy asks softly, did you ever feel like quitting? The question lands heavy. Pedro doesn't answer right away. He looks out at the audience, then back to the hosts, then down again. His fingers fidget, rubbing his thumb against his knuckle like he's trying to erase a thought. Yes, he says finally. One word. Honest. Unfiltered. A wave moves through the crowd. Not shock, recognition. There were nights, Pedro says, where I'd lie awake and think, maybe this dream is just a way to punish yourself. Maybe wanting this much is arrogant. Maybe you're supposed to let it go. His voice cracks slightly on the last sentence. He steadies himself. And then you wake up the next morning, he adds, and you still want it. And that's when it hurts the most. Whoopi closes her eyes briefly, absorbing it. When she opens them, they shine. She says, I've sat across from a lot of people in this chair. The ones who last aren't the ones who never doubted. They're the ones who doubted and showed up anyway. Pedro's lips tremble into a small smile. I wish someone had told me that earlier. Maybe you needed to hear it now, Whoopi replies. The camera cuts to the audience. Faces wet with tears, hands clasped over mouths, people nodding as if he's speaking directly to them. Online, the clip is already spreading, comments pouring in faster than producers can track. But in this room, time feels suspended. Pedro inhales deeply. There's something else, he says, quieter now. Something I don't talk about much. The hosts instinctively lean in. The audience feels it. This is a step further. A deeper door. I grew up watching people like you, Pedro says, turning slightly toward Whoopi. People who didn't look like the default, who still took up space. And that mattered more than I knew at the time. Whoopi's breath catches. She straightens, eyes locked on him. There were moments, Pedro continues, where I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Too much of one thing. Not enough of another. And seeing someone be unapologetic about who they were, it kept me going. The room exhales together. Whoopi's voice is thick when she responds. Representation isn't about being seen, she says. It's about surviving long enough for someone else to see themselves. Pedro nods, emotion washing over his face again. That's it. That's exactly it. He pauses, then adds, almost to himself, I don't think I ever said thank you out loud. Whoopi doesn't hesitate. She reaches across the table, not touching him, but close enough to bridge the space. You just did. The audience breaks into applause then. Not loud, not wild, but sustained. Respectful. Earned. Pedro wipes his eyes again, laughing softly. This is the most honest I've been on television, he admits. Sunny smiles warmly. It shows, but the moment doesn't dissolve into relief. Instead, it deepens. Because honesty has momentum. Pedro sits back slightly, shoulders dropping for the first time since he arrived. I think the hardest part, he says, is that when people love you for characters who never break, you feel like you're not allowed to. Joy nods. Fans don't always realize the weight they put on people. I adore them, Pedro says quickly. Truly. But sometimes I feel like I'm disappointing someone just by admitting I'm tired. Whoopi's voice firms, not harsh but grounded. Listen to me, she says. You don't owe strength to anyone. You owe truth to yourself. Pedro swallows. The words land. Hard. I'm still learning that, he says. The director's voice murmurs faintly through an earpiece. Time check, gentle reminder. The show must move on. But no one at the table rushes it. Not yet. Pedro looks out at the audience one more time. If anyone out there feels like they're behind, he says, like they missed their moment, I want you to know, I felt that way for a very long time. A tear slips again, but he doesn't wipe it away this time. And you're not broken for feeling it. The studio rises in applause, stronger now, fuller. Not because it's expected, but because it's necessary. Whoopi nods, eyes shining, voice steady as she closes the moment. That, she says, is why we're here. But even as the cameras pull back, even as the show prepares to pivot to the next topic, there's an unspoken truth hanging in the air. Pedro Pascal didn't just share a story. He opened a wound that millions recognize as their own. And the world is listening. The applause fades slowly, like a tide pulling back, leaving the room changed in ways no one can quite name yet. Pedro sits there, hands folded loosely now, shoulders lower than before, as if something heavy has finally been set down, even if only for a moment. The show moves forward on paper, but emotionally, no one has moved on. Whoopi glances toward the producer's desk, then back to Pedro. We've got time, she says, calmly but deliberately. It's not a question. It's a decision. Pedro looks at her, surprised. A faint smile touches his lips, mixed with gratitude and something like relief. Okay, he says quietly. Joy shifts in her seat. You know, she begins carefully, people don't realize how lonely admiration can be. Pedro lets out a slow breath. It really can be. He pauses, searching for the right words. The cameras zoom just a little closer. Not invasive, intentional. The audience senses this isn't about performance anymore. It's about confession. When things started to change for me, Pedro says, I thought the fear would disappear. But it just evolved. It got smarter. Sunny nods. How so? It started whispering instead of shouting, he explains. It told me not to mess it up. To be careful. To not show too much. Because the moment people see the cracks, they leave. A murmur ripples through the audience. Someone quietly says, wow. Pedro hears it. He smiles sadly. And that's the cruel joke, he adds. The more love you get, the more you're terrified of losing it. Whoopi leans back, crossing her arms, eyes never leaving him. That fear can make you disappear while you're still standing in front of everyone. Pedro nods. Exactly. He rubs his hands together, grounding himself. There were days on set, he continues, where I'd be surrounded by hundreds of people, and I'd still feel completely alone. Everyone sees the costume, the role, the character. No one sees the guy underneath wondering if he's enough. The room tightens around his words. Joy speaks up again, softer now. Did you ever feel like you had to earn love over and over? Pedro laughs quietly. This time, there's pain in it. Every day. He glances at Whoopi, then back at the audience. I come from a family that survived by adapting, by staying quiet, by not asking for too much. And that stays in your bones. Whoopi's expression shifts, recognition flashing across her face. Survival habits don't vanish just because the danger does. No, Pedro says. They just wear nicer clothes. The audience reacts with a low, collective sound, half laughter, half ache. Pedro straightens slightly, as if bracing himself. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until my body started forcing me to stop. Sonny's eyes widen. Forcing you how? Pedro hesitates. The hesitation is loud. There were panic attacks, he admits. Out of nowhere. No warning. I'd be fine 1 second, and the next, it felt like the room was closing in. A hush falls instantly. This is different. This is raw. I didn't want to talk about it, Pedro continues, because I thought it meant I wasn't grateful enough. Or strong enough. Whoopi shakes her head slowly, firmly. That's a lie we tell ourselves to survive. Pedro nods. I know that now. He exhales shakily. But at the time I thought if I just push through, it'll go away. Joy's voice cracks slightly. It never does. No, Pedro says. It doesn't. The audience is visibly emotional now. Tears roll freely. A woman in the front row presses her hand to her chest. A man wipes his eyes, staring straight ahead. Pedro looks out at them, eyes wet again. I see you, he says suddenly, voice thick. I really do. The statement lands like a pulse through the room. Whoopi leans forward, elbows on the table. You don't owe anyone silence, she says. And you don't owe anyone pain. Pedro smiles through tears. I'm starting to believe that. There's a brief pause, just long enough for the weight of the moment to settle. Then Whoopi asks the question no one expected, her voice calm but piercing. Who were you afraid of disappointing the most? Pedro freezes. The audience leans in collectively. Even the cameras seem to hold their breath. My parents, he says quietly. And myself. He swallows hard. They sacrificed so much. And I kept thinking, if I fail, I prove every fear right. That I wasn't worth the risk. Whoopi's eyes soften completely now. Baby, she says, survival doesn't require perfection. Pedro closes his eyes briefly, absorbing it. When he opens them, tears spill freely. He doesn't fight them. I wish I could tell my younger self that, he whispers. Whoopi nods. You just did. The audience breaks into applause again. This time louder, more emotional, bordering on catharsis. The sound fills the studio, wrapping around Pedro like a blanket. He laughs through tears, shaking his head. This show is dangerous, he jokes weakly. Whoopi smiles gently. Only if you've been carrying too much. The director signals again, final moments approaching. The energy is electric, fragile, unforgettable. Pedro takes one last breath, steadying himself. If there's one thing I hope people take from this, he says, it's that you don't have to wait until you're breaking to ask for help. A beat. And you don't have to be famous for your pain to matter. The studio erupts, not in chaos, but in affirmation. Applause, cheers, people standing to their feet. Whoopi stands as well, placing a hand over her heart. Thank you, she says simply, for trusting us with that. Pedro nods, eyes shining, voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for making it safe. As the cameras pull back, as the show prepares to fade into commercial, one truth is undeniable. This wasn't television. This was a reckoning, and its echo is only beginning. The cameras cut to commercial, but the room doesn't exhale the way it usually does. No one jumps up. No one chats. The audience stays standing, some with hands over their mouths, others wiping tears they didn't expect to shed on a weekday morning. Pedro remains seated for a moment longer, eyes closed, breathing slowly, as if relearning how to be inside his own body. Whoopi is the first to move. She steps around the table without hesitation and pulls him into a quiet, grounding hug. It isn't for the cameras, they're technically off, but the room feels it anyway. Pedro's shoulders shake once. Just once. Then he steadies. You did good, Whoopi murmurs, low enough that only he and the closest microphones catch it. Pedro nods against her shoulder. I didn't mean to go that far. She pulls back just enough to look at him. Sometimes far is where the truth lives. When the show returns from break, the tone is gentler, almost reverent. The hosts move through the remaining segments carefully, But everyone knows the center of gravity has already passed. Pedro speaks less now, listening more, a quiet calm settling over him. The audience applauds when expected, but there's a tenderness to it, like they're clapping for something sacred. As the final credits roll, the standing ovation comes without prompting. Pedro rises, visibly overwhelmed. He presses a hand to his heart, bows his head slightly, and mouths "thank you" again and again as the applause follows him off stage. But that's only the beginning. Within minutes, clips flood social media. The tear. The pause. Whoopi's voice saying, "You don't owe strength to anyone." Captions appear faster than anyone can read them. "I didn't know I needed this today." He said everything I've been feeling. This healed something in me. Hashtags trend. Comment sections fill with stories. People opening up about panic attacks, burnout, fear of disappointing their families, the quiet exhaustion of surviving. Therapists share the clip. Actors share the clip. Teachers, nurses, students, parents, sharing, resharing, writing long captions they never planned to post. Entertainment headlines scramble to keep up, but they struggle to label it. Not a meltdown. Not a breakdown. Not a scandal. Something else. By evening, Pedro releases a short statement. No PR gloss. No dramatic spin. "Thank you for listening," it reads. "And for reminding me I'm not alone." Whoopi responds with a single line. "None of us are." The moment replays on late-night shows, on news panels, in podcasts dissecting celebrity culture and emotional labor. But no analysis quite captures it. Because what happened wasn't about fame. It was about permission. Permission to be tired. Permission to be scared. Permission to be human. Even when the world expects you to be unbreakable. Weeks later, fans still talk about it. Not as gossip. As a turning point. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do on live television is tell the truth. Now it's your turn. What did Pedro Pascal's moment mean to you? Did it hit close to home? Did it change the way you see strength, success, or vulnerability? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if you want more raw, cinematic, unforgettable stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to Stage View. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because some moments aren't just watched. They're felt.